After a deflating couple of weeks, Arsenal need a lift. We, as fans, need a lift. And although this video is being filmed prior to the game against Nottingham Forest, it doesn't come before Mikel Arteta broke the news of Riccardo Calafiori's return to the Arsenal squad for Saturday's game. For me, Calafiori's return could be the boost that we just needed. There is an off-the-cuff nature to the Italians game that automatically grabbed us fans, and I think many would point to his equaliser away at Manchester City as a staple example of that unpredictability that populates his game, an improvisatory finish in many senses, and an equally spontaneous and adrenaline-filled celebration. However, for me, it's important to take our eyes off these moments of spectacle and instead note how his, maverick mentality or different type of energy that Calafiori brings starts with how he has been conveyed to us by Mikel Arteta off the pitch, and then how that begins to inform his marauding, gallivanting runs or strange places he pops up in on the pitch.
I fell in love with him. I watched him a year ago and I saw something different, an aura, a charisma, a presence that it was not only related about his skill.
Because I think if we can begin to understand how Calafiori is not just this untamed Italian stallion, but a personality that Mikel has consciously selected himself, we begin to see a player who is not just a maverick in of themselves, but an extremely calculated footballer too.
Well, he brings a lot of versatility because he can play 2-3 different positions and especially in attack occupy different spaces.
Throughout this video, you're going to see a lot of that occupation of different spaces that Mikel really emphasises in relation to how we attack. And this hones in on Calafiori's brain and intelligence and how his infectious influence can ripple across the pitch. An infectiousness that, if it catches, can maybe give Arsenal that kickstart we need as we look to build momentum moving into the festive schedule. This is where we leave the abstractions though and move into the more detailed analysis. Starting with Calafiori's effects on our build-up. Having a big dynamic mover playing on their strong side is such a positive for our fluid build-up that often creates so much space for its fullbacks. This is a common sight, isn't it? One of our pivots dropping into the back line or keeping both of our interiors higher up the pitch, which places a massive emphasis on our fullbacks arriving into space, often being a third man in a combination and able to carry us up the pitch. You've seen some examples on the screen, also how someone of Raya's competence on the ball can clip passes to our fullback, how we can pivot from one fullback, one side to another, how this stretches a press really wide, allowing us to oftentimes play through the middle before accessing these pushers from our flanks, who have cleverly got themselves free from their markers. Calafiori often goes into these positions of real threat where he becomes that runaway outside man, complemented here with Rice staying lower a bit to quarterback and make the most of a switch of play and pushing Martinelli on the inside. And when this happens, this can give our left hand side a real look of velocity and purpose. It's clear Calafiori's intelligence and dynamism in his movements are really hard for an opposition to pin down, and even if we ourselves are tracking his whereabouts closely, it often takes us by surprise too. Here, he is hovering in this deliberately positionless position on top of our pivot, roaming across to the right to receive from Timber. But this is the point. These instances are meant to take you by surprise. You're meant to do a double take when you see Calafiori popping up at the top of our midfield box or when he's drifted across to the right-hand side because of how seamless these movements look and how it's balanced out by the other players on the pitch, and the very point of these improvisations not being random but calculated collectively are notions that have defined my recent videos on the channel. But back to Calafiori, because it would be reductive just to conceive of him as this free-spirited mover. He loves to receive at awkward angles, to play with his right foot and to embrace unorthodoxy, and this makes our attack when you get the sense, as we're moving forward, that our final third impression is still figuring itself out. When we break lines and move forward quickly, it makes these attacks much more effective if you have someone who excels in these slightly more chaotic environments. This is a brilliant example, so I'm sorry for rehashing it, but here, Calafiori moves inside to receive from Martinelli, who immediately rushes in behind, to which Calafiori sends him a ball over the top with his so-called weaker foot. You can see how associative and how easy it is to strike up a connection with Calafiori. This ambitiousness and Calafiori's ability to make the most of our fluidity certainly remedies some central access problems too, especially if we see a bit more of this template with Rice able to carry and launch attacks from the base of midfield, and you've got Timber and or Calafiori in the pockets together maybe, giving us a blend of burst, carrying, combinations, and with Ødegaard replacing Trossard offset slightly higher here, he's able to drop down, to overload, offer some measure if things ever get too frantic. This isn't something that's going to occur too often with the double inversions, but it's more important about the balance that I'm going to talk about later on. I think with this wide-ranging threat we're starting to get a feel for now, it's important to move on to Calafiori's final third, impact. Again, you'll see the carryover of his being able to occupy multiple zones on the pitch, whether that's inverting lower into a pivot or a midfield three when we squeeze an opposition in, often counteracting the other fullback's movements on the opposite flank, but also holding the width on the outside, which gives us a strong-footed overlap now. I don't want to use this as just sort of a buzz phrase, which I think it's become, because this not only pushes Martinelli inside and closer to goal, but it allows for a bit of additiveness on Calafiori's own part, those low left-footed crosses into the box that Zinchenko does really well when he goes roaming in the final third. And Calafiori is also a two-way threat, let's not forget. He loves to carry on the inside too. Of course, he can stay on the inside, as we know, and give us some thrust in that high left pocket as well. The key takeaway is Calafiori does not just sit or hold down a zone. His quality, partnered with his mental framing, I think, to constantly and deliberately attempt to unsettle, to provoke, to create, gives us genuine upside when attacking. And it often actually makes him sort of the main piece of our left-hand-sided jigsaw or rotations. He opens up tight spaces really well with his combinations or big sprinting underlaps. He creates holes to disorganize opposition blocks, and I've referred to this before, but it's something that inadvertently, this disorganization of blocks, that would have helped us alleviate some of the issues in our playing in the final third we've had without Martin Ødegaard. Of course though, there's a real ability for Calafiori to measure from lower, which gives us potential for those dynamic rotations between Merino and Calafiori. We've already seen Merino rotate really cleverly in and out and high and low with Jurrien Timber in an Arsenal shirt. So look here how Calafiori's left foot opens up the pitch as he cuts it through to Declan Rice. All in all, I think other absences has meant we've felt Calafiori's absence much more than we should have. But when you have action maps like this that just scream busyness and variety, it makes you realise how unique Calafiori is as a player and how he doesn't really need any specific environment to thrive in. This is a nice segue, I think, into how Calafiori moves back into this Arsenal team now. We've already discussed lots of possibilities naturally, and you'll see many of them, hopefully if he played, on show against Nottingham Forest today. But with Ødegaard and Merino entering the fold once more, let's look at how these templates may look with Calafiori going forward. Because with Ødegaard returning, we are not going to see this type of base that we've come to grow used to, but more of this type of look we spoke about earlier in terms of giving the fullback space to move into, and also with Merino and Ødegaard back in the midfield, with Declan Rice in the number 6, Calafiori and Timber on their strong sides. You can see how modular or adaptable that pivot next to whoever our number 6 is becomes. Let's take a couple of looks to flesh this out from the Chelsea match now. I think it's fair to say we've certainly gone long from goal kicks, more than we would have liked for multiple reasons this season. But this is an instance where there is a clear advantage to gain from this. This felt choreographed. As soon as Ødegaard and Declan Rice motion deeper, both White and Timber rush higher at the same time, ensuring they get that dynamic advantage, they get the wrong side of their man. And Timber then, this allows him to gobble up Kai Havertz's knockdown. But back to this template, because when you start to add the types of interconnection in tandem with this that we saw once Merino came on against Chelsea in his cameo, with his speed of play, his awareness of surroundings, how he invites collapses and then released Timber so well down the sides, starting to knit us together. You get an idea of, with Calafiori, how slick this left-hand side can start to look. Calafiori, of course, as we mentioned, isn't confined to this outside space, and here Timber gives us a nice example of creating space on the inside for our winger, played in by Merino. And as Trossard receives it wide and then carries inside like Calafiori likes to do, we see a rare moment of pocket-to-pocket link-up where Ødegaard has been allowed to move higher because of this added security deeper down. Or look at this space that we create actually deep in our build-up. If we want someone to organise us like Ødegaard, he can drop, but I can see here Merino filing into that left-back zone a bit deeper to where Partey is now, and instead of Rice doing this big sprint across and us losing the ball and conceding a free kick with a really unprotected centre, leave that roaming to Calafiori instead. Make the most of this space our fluidity has created. Like I said, there's definitely a better balance in our possession stuff here, and there's a slight relocation to where we are aggressive on the pitch. And there's definitely a variety in the ways we can build up the ball. But I also want to touch on how Ødegaard and Calafiori may actually directly link up themselves. This comes from the Southampton match. You may remember this. Watch Kai Havertz here, who remains on the edge of our build-up, able to fill in the gaps if he wants. But watch how Merino's presence frees him to drift left. And as we work it round to Calafiori, who speeds up play first time, you get this moment where a left footer is coming onto the ball from right to left, with the option of either playing in Martinelli in behind or Calafiori on the overlap. In other words, something that really suits Martin Ødegaard. I think Calafiori's return should just give us that threat from all angles across the pitch once again, able to rock from side to side or high to low in our build-up, or in the final third, allow Merino to maybe be that more forward-thinking box crashy left centre mid, or maybe let him anchor things and calm down our tempo of play from deeper. Maybe we want to be a bit more positional and rigid in our build-up, or maybe we want those little intuitive changes where Saliba finds himself like this wandering into midfield, or maybe more likely in this position, Rice, giving us that same drop and drive from the base, connecting us to Merino, who shows how we can have this sort of sum of movements and rotations in tandem with a real close-knittedness in possession. But also, of course, that dynamism from our fullback, as in this example, he releases Timber away on the left-hand side, the soon-to-be Calafiori. It's not about the best player on the planet suddenly returning and winning us the Premier League title. That's not what Calafiori is going to do, but it's just this completely unique profile, and one that I believe can give us the impetus that we need as we go towards a very pivotal run of games in our season. But I think it's crucial that we end on how we want to manage Calafiori's workload going forward, because with Timber, the only natural available right back at the moment, and with our fullback role so action-packed as it is, and with what I hope is an out-of-possession setup that looks to have a lot of its main cogs back now, we need to watch Calafiori, because I can already see those moments of sort of psycho counter-pressing where Calafiori, Merino, or even someone like Raheem Sterling, if he starts to get more minutes after the international break now, which is a completely whole other debate, maybe trying to speed things up, maybe losing it, but that scary counter-press swarming an opposition, getting a high regain, and I think we can see of us taking advantage of some really disorganised defences with these quick counter-pressy regains. But as I said, let's be cautious with Calafiori, because as I said at the beginning, it's not just about him being this untamed beast. And as Arteta looks to transition Arsenal into a side full of those player-manager types who can improvise on the fly, pick their poison when it comes to strategy, Calafiori is one of the beating hearts of that brain, and someone I'm extremely glad to have back.